Okay, so we've simplified the landscapes. What's gone on with constituent populations in animal communities? And again, I'm going to talk mostly about birds. And much of what I'm going to talk about in terms of trends stems from something called the Breeding Bird Survey. Anyone heard of the Breeding Bird Survey, the BBS? Okay, I see a few heads being nodded. That's really a unique thing because it involves the government and it works really well. It's a federal government-sponsored program. Okay, it started in 1966. And what it is, it's a citizen census effort for birds, where bird nerds like me get in a car in May or June, and they have a route that they're going to follow. And it's 20 miles long, and every mile you get out, and you just listen to the birds, and you record everything you see and hear. By that stop, get back in the car, drive another few miles, get out, listen, and whatnot. And that's what's called the Breeding Bird Survey. There's thousands of these Breeding Bird Survey routes throughout the United States. And this is, since 1966, this has allowed us to get sort of a long-term glimpse, and as far as ecological data sets go, since 1966 is long-term. It's actually allowed us to make a lot of characterization of what's gone on with animal communities, bird communities in this case, to see what's gone on in terms of diversity, and to actually characterize trends and abundances on a local and a region-wide scale. So what's gone on with grassland birds? This is what's gone on with field sparrows. What's shown in red there is a significant decrease. Okay, now the scale of this is a rather blunt instrument the way they characterize this, but you don't need to be a biologist, you don't need to be anything other than a person that has common sense to see that there's something going on here, because what's shown in red there means a significant decrease. And the people that do these analysis, this is all with the Fish and Wildlife Service in Maryland, the people that do these analysis, they actually are pretty conservative about what they call significant. That's kind of a statistical term, okay? But they're very conservative. This is actually a conservative result that, if they say that's a significant change, then it's pretty safe that it is. And you can see that throughout most of their range, most of their breeding range. And it's not that they don't breed in Canada, it's just that the BBS limit is up there. Yeah, Eric?
Over what period of time is this? I see this is change per year. It says 1.5%.
Right.
How many years do you multiply that out?
That's since 1966.
Oh.
Okay, so that's sort of smoothed over the entire time from 1966 up through this. I think this is in 2007. So this is a long-term decrease during that time when the agricultural landscape really changed. So this is pretty safe evidence that something's going on to change. And this is fairly typical as well. Now, this is percent change, okay? So what this means is where they're showing an increase here, there's actually not that many field sparrows anyway. So, you can lie with statistics, right? The government does this all the time. If they're spending $100 on something, and then they cut it by 20, they spend less, then they can say that they've changed the percentage a lot. And so you can really, percents really can lie. But what this means is the abundances of this particular species have decreased almost everywhere. And this is a species that breeds in grassland habitat. This is another one, the Henslow sparrow, a little less known than field sparrows, one that bird conservationists really worry about. And you can see here that this is also decreasing throughout most of this range. Now this bird does not breed here. They take some liberties with what they actually paint here. They're not all that common a breeder in the lower Sonoran Desert here. But here is the area where the sort of ground zero for Henslow sparrows. And you can see throughout most of the range they're decreasing. And I could show map after map after map for species for constituent animal populations in this ecosystem, and most of them are decreasing. A few aren't, but most of them are. Illinois prairie chickens. We used to have millions of prairie chickens in Illinois. In fact, up through the 1930s, they were a game species in Illinois. In DuPage County, people used to hunt prairie chickens in the 1920s, 1930s. Okay, they were actually quite common. They're sort of a signature species of grassland habitat. And as you can see here, since the early 1800s up through the 1990s, and it's pretty much the same thing in Jasper County and one other county, we have two remnant populations. You can see that their populations have really contracted and really decreased. Okay? And this is a species that's what's called area sensitive. they really need large areas of grassland. So this is a particularly telling event, because you just don't get prairie chickens on a 5-acre plot of restored tall grass prairie. You don't get them on 10 acres. They need hundreds of acres. And there's some areas in Jasper County and Marion County where the Nature Conservancy in the state have bought a lot of land and restored it. So they're holding on there. But this is another case of you just see what's gone on with populations that are associated with this ecosystem. So since 1966, about 60%, 6 out of every 10 species have decreased significantly, or depending on how you want to phrase it, catastrophically or whatever, but shown very worrisome trends in their abundances. Okay? Now numbers are one thing, but there's actually, ecologists also worry about the viability of populations. And what we mean by viability of populations is where you do have them, are they reproducing successfully? Are they doing pretty well? Okay? And habitat fragmentation is really kind of a double whammy on a lot of animal populations, because not only is there less habitat available, but the quality of that habitat for breeding and whatnot is also decreased as well. And this is where we talk about things like edge effects and things like that. And this is a dickcissel nest. And it's typical with grassland birds that if they're in just small patches of habitat, because that, in a lot of cases, that's all what we have is a little patch of habitat here, a little patch of habitat there, instead of these extensive landscapes of habitat. You have a lot of what's called edge habitat, so there's just a lot of interface between restored habitat and agricultural habitat or urban or suburban habitat. Those edges are very bad, are not particularly good places for breeding birds, because along those edges, birds suffer a lot of nest predation, they suffer a lot of parasitism by brown-headed cowbirds, which brown-headed cowbirds are a species that lays its eggs in the nests of other species, and then that species is sort of hoodwinked into raising the cowbird young as if they're their own. And you don't need to be a strict Darwinian to figure out that if you're raising the young of another species, it's not particularly good for your own fitness. So there's just a lot of ecological processes that go on here that make even where we've got habitat, if it's really fragmented and in small little patches, that viability or the sort of reproductive value of those habitats is very low. So there's a couple things going on here that are making it very difficult for grassland birds to hold on, even when there is habitat. Okay. Now one solution to all this, or one, and this has been, this problem with grassland habitat and grassland wildlife has been around for a while, has been to offer land incentives to keep some land in a semi-natural state. And the Conservation Reserve Program, or the CRP, is a program where set-asides, the government pays farmers to not farm land. It's a set-aside program. It was instigated, I think, in the 1980s with the Farm Bill. I'm not quite sure about that. But CRP has proven to be exceptionally successful, okay? There's been, what you can see here in this map, just the sort of greenish tinge there is when there was a lot of CRP contracts between farmers signed up for 10 years. They were given a subsidy, okay, but that land was usually highly erodible land. That land was given over for natural habitat. And some CRP people that had CRP contracts did more natural things with their land than others. But in balance, the point of it was to decrease soil erosion, as this sort of boilerplate sign says, improves water quality, improves habitat for wildlife. It's a nesting success for upland game birds such as pheasant, many prairie songbirds, lark bunny, bobolink, and pond sparrow greatly increased because of CRP. That's actually not just a boilerplate statement from a state DNR. That's very, very true. Okay, it's been a very successful program.